Hey all everybody, and welcome to another full series spoilers edition of Dr. Candlepun's Lost podcast. Today I will be talking about season 1, episode 18 of Lost, titled Numbers, in the context of the completed story. So as usual, I am going to be playing this episode on mute and talking over it as a commentary of sorts. That said, you do not need to watch along with me if you do not want to. I will do my best to, if I'm referring to a specific scene that's happening on screen, I will do my best to make it clear what is happening and what I am referring to. And yeah, with that out of the way, if you do want to watch along with me, I am pressing play now. And the first image is on the screen. We are recapping. Okay. So, I guess while we're recapping, I will address the delay in release schedule. So, I recently started a new job and have been dealing with some other things, including um, frustration on the editing side again. Sometimes I lose some motivation when it comes to um, pumping these out the way that I am, especially when I have other things that I feel like I should be prioritizing. It makes it even harder to kind of make the time, or to find the motivation to make the time, certainly. Um, anyways, so also, I will say that in the past week, I've been keeping an eye on the first time viewers discussion of this episode that I recently released, and it does seem like what I've started to notice, and I mean, and this isn't a total shock, is that when there's a bit more space between the videos, it seems to um, the channel seems to perform better. There's more engagement with the video, and like I've gained 2 subscribers in the past week, whereas it was stagnant for a while. And yeah, the last video has a lot more views. Um, so I don't know. Again, I think I've expressed this before, but I'm kind of like a little bit regretting the decision to pump out like 3 different podcast episodes, sometimes within a week period. Um, I think maybe I should have done 1 or 2, and then like in the hiatus like done maybe the spoilery commentaries or something. That actually probably would have made sense as far as like, yeah, just having consistent content. And yeah, I don't know. Anyways, with all that said, I don't want anybody to think that I am like stopping the podcast or anything. We have another several weeks. I mean, yeah, basically, we had like 2 months before the season 1 finale aired, and I am confident that we will be back on schedule before that, well before that. Um, anyways, okay, so now let's actually start talking about this episode. We finally get our Hurley episode. He's watching the lottery numbers get drawn. Um, so I think I'll start with a comment from Homo sapiens 99 that he left on, um, sorry, from Homo sapiens. That's that he left on our first time viewers discussion of this episode. So yeah, he said, I love the chemistry between Julia and Brian. They should have a show together where they give advice or something. Yeah, I'll pause right there to say that I also enjoy their back and forth, particularly when it comes to Locke and their um, aggressively different views on him. Yeah, they're both on 2 separate extreme, like the 2 opposite extremes of the spectrum when it comes to Locke. Um, and yeah, I do find myself having a bit more fun while editing, listening to their back and forth when they're both on one of those discussion episodes. Yeah. Okay, continuing on with Homo sapiens comment. Another fun fact about the lottery girl is that she's played by the wife of the actor who plays Michael. My favorite early instance of the numbers appearing is in the pilot, when Jack pounds on the cockpit door. He pounds on it exactly 8 times before it flies open. I never realized that this episode was hinting a connection between the hatch and the radio tower until you brought it up. I think when I first watched this episode, I just thought that the numbers being written on the hatch was just an omen that the hatch was bad or something along those lines. Yeah, I don't remember, and again, I watched it in a weird order in the first 2 seasons, but yeah, I don't remember if like I made the connection. Well, so in between seasons 2 and 3, they had the Lost Experience ARG, and in that they revealed that that Alvar Hanso orientation, in which he talks about the radio tower being erected by Dharma and it transmitting the numbers. So obviously by that point, like I understood that the radio station was Dharma's. I don't really remember how much I thought about it prior to that. So yeah, I don't know if it was even worth me mentioning that, but yeah, those are all good things worth pointing out. Thank you, Homo sapiens. The 8 times before the door flies open in the cockpit. That sounds familiar, but I don't remember for sure if I've ever come across that. I know that's not something I would have noticed on my own for sure. Um, but yeah, but that's the fun thing about the numbers, right? And we talked about that in both of the previous podcast episodes. Is you could literally find them anywhere. Like like if you're looking for them hard enough, like you can. Like I just saw an 8 on the news van in this flashback. Which I mean, things like that probably intentional. In an episode called Numbers about these numbers, yeah, they probably chose 8 on purpose. But I mean, yeah, it's like okay, so we just did our main podcast episode on Exodus Part 1, and like in the first flashback of that episode, we see Michael looking at an alarm clock and it says it's 5:23. I say, okay, obviously 23 is one of the numbers, but 5 isn't. Oh, but wait, if you take 2 and 3 and you add them together, you get 5. So 5 is 2 and 3. And like, yeah, I was in high school when I started watching this show, and like I remember everywhere, like license plates. Anytime I'd look at a clock, just literally any numbers that I was seeing, like I'd be like, oh, there are the numbers, and like there's always a way to like turn them into a version of the numbers, and I think the show does play with that a bit because there are obviously lots of numbers in this show that aren't that are just a few steps away of being connected to the main 6 numbers. Um, and so yeah, that made me think of it because do I think in the pilot that the writers intentionally, or the editors, whoever, like intentionally showed him hitting that 8 times because they knew it was going to be a number? I mean, I won't pretend to know, but I would be somewhat surprised if that were the case. But yeah, that's the cool thing about the numbers and this whole idea and this whole plot line. Um, is it's kind of demonstrating that idea of projecting meaning onto things that may or may not have meaning behind them. Um, we talked a lot about that in both of the podcast episodes, and I even wondered, like, am I focusing on this counter interpretation of the numbers a bit too much for the first time viewers? Because the episode does seem to present these numbers as unambiguously um, dangerous or ominous. And I'm obviously operating with some insight of where the show goes with this later, specifically in season 3, in Hurley's episode in that season, Trisha Tanaka is dead. The whole point of that episode is Hurley concluding that what his dad told him as a child was correct, which is we make our own luck. Like it's all based on your perception and the way that you're reading these things, and if you um yeah, just choose not to let that dictate, your belief and your perception of the world. Um, you can accomplish things that you otherwise would be too afraid to try. Um, now, obviously I'll talk way more about that when we get to that episode, but because yeah, I do think that there's more going on there as far as like, okay, what they do and what they accomplish as far as pushing that van down the hill. Um, in no rational sense should that have worked. So it kind of goes to the other extreme of like, instead of unbelievable bad luck, it's unbelievable good luck. But I think it totally fits with the show and like in a more literal sense, the abilities that are shown to exist in the show. I've already talked quite a bit about people manifesting things if they will it hard enough, specifically on this island, because of that energy and the way that people can harness that energy in some way. I talked about that with Jack bringing Charlie back. I think that he so badly wanted that to be the case, and his own limited interaction with the island's energy, like he was able to manifest that into working. Uh, and obviously Walt is the big example as far as manifesting things into reality. Um, but yeah, again, that's not really super relevant to what I'm talking about here. The point is that the show eventually makes the point that like luck is subjective, just like pretty much everything as far as beliefs in the show go. Um, it all depends on the perspective and what people choose to believe, and the more important thing is how do people act based on those beliefs, and why is that sometimes a beautiful thing and sometimes a scary thing. Um, Now, on that note, I think that's actually a pretty good transition into another comment. Um, this is from Lucas43434, and it's in regards to what I recently talked about on one of these commentaries about. I mean, I've talked about this a lot, but yeah, there was a more recent time where I talked about how I don't believe the island has a will of its own, and some of the reasons that I feel that way. And Lucas has a really great comment here that I definitely I definitely think he makes some good points, and I definitely want to readdress some things that I've said before. Um, so yeah, Lucas says, personally, I think there's too much magic in the show to make a clear point about the island not having its own will. One example might be with the hatch implosion, where everyone trapped inside was teleported outside to safety completely unscathed. This wouldn't be the Man in Black's doing, and it seems incredibly convenient to just be the lucky result of a natural phenomenon. Why wouldn't a random sorry, why wouldn't a random wormhole put them underground or 50 feet in the air? A similar thing happened with the Ajira plane and the original oceanic crash. The characters were seemingly placed gently on the ground instead of falling to their death. Um, I'm trying. I wanted to pause somewhere around here. I'm trying to. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to pause there. That's about halfway through. Um, yeah, no. So that kind of goes to what I was just saying and why I thought this would be a good transition because, um, like, yeah, I mean, I agree with that interpretation. That I mean, so crazy, weird things happen all the time, as far as like how did that person possibly survive this accident, or how did this you know barreling vehicles car crash miss these people in this walkway. Things that people do project, like guardian angels or miracles, or stuff like that. They project that onto that, and I am not saying that anybody's wrong for doing that. I mean, that's the thing, we cannot possibly know if they're right or wrong. Um, and I certainly would never say with certainty that, oh no, it was just pure chance, um, or certainly the other way around, with pure certainty that there was some benevolent force behind it. So I'm saying that to say that yeah, I'm not saying that you're wrong for having the interpretation that something conscious had to be behind those things. And yeah, I'm going to continue with the comment before I maybe shouldn't have even paused, because this next point is one of my favorites here. Um, the light at the heart of the island is, in my understanding, the stuff consciousness is made of. Some of it is inside every man. The memories inside the black smoke are made of light. In the commentary for Across the Sea, Damon and Carlton describe the island as having a circulatory system connected to the heart, which I think lends itself to the idea of the island having a character of its own, which was something they talked about from the beginning. Anyway, I'm not sold one way or another on whether the island itself had a will. I assumed that the ghosts who appear to Hurley have moved on into the light and are now part of it, but they could also be making their last mark on the world before entering their flash sideways amnesia. Okay, so yeah, still a lot there to address, but yeah, the point that I thought was really good was like, I've never heard anybody, and I'm sure people have, and I just haven't come across it or been listening well enough, but um, the way so explaining that that what people mean when they say the island has a will of its own is that the energy made up of consciousness has some kind of will of its own. Like, again, I don't really share that belief, and I'll get more into that again, but like, but I think that's a really good way to explain it, and it certainly gets me more on board with other people having that interpretation. Um, because yeah, I mean, yeah, that does make sense. But okay, but why even with it making sense, why do I not like it? Um, because for me, from a storytelling perspective, it gets very contrived and convenient. Like, okay, so the island has a will of its own, and it's benevolent, and it's making sure these things happen to reach a certain goal. Um, okay, and for example, okay, yeah, like it moves the people. I'm trying to think of like the best example to use here. If it's capable of doing all of these things, it raises the question of why doesn't it get involved in other situations? Like, if it's capable of like saving all of these lives in the plane crashes, right? Why does it not choose to um, save more people? If it's benevolent and it wants this ultimate good thing to happen, um, or like, why let the Man in Black exist at all? Like, since he is literally the biggest threat to the island, the source itself, yeah, the existence of the island. Since he is the biggest threat to it, why does it let him exist? If he's so tethered and restricted by the island and this energy, why does it not? I don't know. Get rid of him. I mean, it's again, to me, like the only answer to these questions is, well, the writers wanted the island to interfere here so that a certain thing would happen. Um, or they didn't let the island get involved because they wanted this bad thing to play out. Um, yeah, so mm, it's tricky talking about this stuff without getting into like real world religion, spiritual beliefs and stuff. But yeah, I just mean from like the thing is, okay. Well, so here's the thing, right? With real life, we don't know if there's a conscious author to any of this. We don't know that. You may believe one way or the other. With a show, with a story, we know that it has conscious authors. We know that things are happening the way that they're telling the story. And my belief in good storytelling is that the characters should be responsible for the choices that are made and for the direction that the story goes. It shouldn't just be a Deus Ex Machina, for example. um, the title of the next episode. Because that's lazy. Like it's just things should be consistent as far as motivations and how that moves the plot forward. And so by me interpreting the monster, for example, being behind these things that other people say the island is behind, that's more satisfying to me, because the monster is a character that we come to understand the motivations of. And so when we go back and we view these mysterious events in the context of, oh, the monster's doing these things to accomplish these goals, that's so much more satisfying than, well, the island just wanted this to happen. Like it wanted to save Locke and Echo and Desmond in this particular circumstance. But in other circumstances with other people, and Echo dying a few days later, it doesn't get involved. It doesn't try to communicate to Echo in some way that he's being manipulated by the monster, or that or again, like it doesn't exert any kind of control over the monster, which I feel like it should be able to do, considering that he is tethered to this energy. Yeah, so again, that's what's more satisfying to me. Is Lucas did follow this up with another comment, with the specific example of Locke losing the feeling in his legs, and I want to get to that in a second. But the other part of this first comment that Lucas said about describing the island as having a circulatory system. Yeah, no, I mean, or like lends itself to the idea of the island having a character of its own, which is something they talked about from the beginning. Now, the way I remember them talking about it is that the island is a character of the show. Like this island has is such a prominent element of the show that it is a character in its own right. That's not the same, in my opinion, as saying that it is conscious. I feel like other people, like other showrunners and stuff, have talked about the setting of their story being such an important element of it that it is a character of the story. Be it because of the climate, the terrain, just all of it. Again, but that said, I try not to get into what the writers say, because there's different ways to interpret it, and there's different quotes for different specific parts. But and that's the thing. I wouldn't be surprised if Damon and Carlton would agree that yes, the island does have a will of its own. I'm just trying to explain why I don't like it, and ultimately, what Lucas has really done for me here is illustrated why I shouldn't try and argue so heavily in favor of the island not being conscious, because like that's like what I was just saying before. That's part of what the show is doing. What it's paralleling in real life is that you can project, like you can decide for yourself if you believe that this is divine intervention or just a coincidence. It's just happening without a conscious. Again, it gets so tricky talking about this, because I agree the show establishes it is a deterministic universe. Things only happen one way, and so I agree with believing that everything happens for a reason. I agree that's a point the show is making, that without any of this bad stuff, you can't have the good stuff. And you kind of have to just accept what's beyond your control. That's not to say that our choices don't matter. They absolutely do. But yeah, like ultimately you have to accept that there's just so much beyond your control, and you have to let go of what you can't control. So I agree with all that, but like, again, okay, this is my point. Sorry, all this rambling. My point is that divine intervention should not be the only possible explanation for an event that occurs in a story. That to me is unsatisfying. If anybody wants to interpret divine intervention in the form of the island as a conscious being interfering, or the island's energy interfering as a conscious being, That's fair, and that even makes some sense to me. And that's what I'm going to stop trying to argue. It doesn't make sense, um, because yeah, fair enough. I just want to point out that there are other, um, that's not necessarily the only interpretation, and that there are ways in which other characters may be responsible for things in ways that I personally find more satisfying. So yeah, there's that. Now, with that in mind, moving on to Lucas's second comment, and he left this on the comment that I just read, so he's specifically responding to what he's already said. Thinking about this question again today, I'm split on whether or not the monster was the one taking away the feeling in Locke's legs. It makes sense that if he was responsible for Locke's dream, he would also be responsible for the other things happening to him in that episode. But why make it harder for Locke to get to the plane than sorry, but why make it harder for Locke to get to the plane, then give him no problems with carrying Boone back to the caves where he might have been saved? If the monster could reverse Locke's healing, wouldn't it have made sense to keep him immobile until Boone was dead? Yes, and I was excited to talk about this. I probably still will in my Deus Ex Machina episode, because yeah, that to me, the fact that Locke is suddenly able to walk again, that's a strong piece of evidence that the Man in Black was behind it. Like basically, he wanted Boone to fall. Once that happened, Locke is suddenly able to walk again. So why? Why would the Man in Black want Boone brought back to Jack if there was a chance to save him? Well, that's the thing. There was no chance to save him. And this is what the episode "Do No Harm" establishes. Boone himself says, look at where we are. Like he says, I'm all messed up inside. Look at where we are. There was never any chance. Basically, as soon as that plane fell, he was done for. All of that internal bleeding, there was no way that Jack was ever going to be able to save him. But by the Man in Black allowing Locke to bring Boone back to Jack, the Man in Black is basically ensuring that enough of Locke's deception is exposed to solidify Jack's animosity towards John. And we know that becomes a big source of conflict through the rest of the series, or specifically the portion of the series where they're both on the island alive. So yeah, like if Boone had just died out at the plane like immediately, or if the monster didn't return Locke's ability to walk until after Boone died, then Locke wouldn't be returning with a situation for Jack to potentially fix. He'd be returning with a dead body. And at that point, like, he'd have no reason to hide the fact of what they were doing. Like, what I'm saying is, like, he oversimplifies what happened to Boone, like by bringing him. Sorry, hold on, because I wrote a comment in response to this, and I'm trying to see how I phrased it there. Okay, yeah. So basically, because Locke needs to urgently get Boone to the caves because he thinks Jack might be able to save him, he doesn't have time to think about what he's going to tell Jack. So he gets Boone to the cave and he tells him he fell. He drastically oversimplifies what happens to Boone, or what happened to Boone, before leaving to go confront the hatch, which he views as the symbol of the island, and this thing that he's put his faith in and that he interprets as having led him down that path. Now, if Boone was dead and he was just bringing Boone's body back, he wouldn't. There would have been no urgency in getting Boone back. He would have had time to process what happened, to think about what happened and how he's going to explain this to Jack and everybody else. And if he had had time to do that, and he wasn't in a hurry to go confront the hatch or the island, then he would have just said, like, oh yeah, we were out hunting and we came across this Beechcraft. Boone climbed up, tried to make a call, and it fell. And that's how he got hurt. everybody would have been satisfied by that. Like that could have been easily verified. There would have been no reason to suspect he's lying. Boone would not have let slip in his semi-conscious state something about a hatch. This wouldn't have caused Sayid to confront Locke and find out about the hatch, which means he wouldn't have told Jack. And then arguably when Russo comes and says, "Oh, the others are coming. Where will you hide your people?" It wouldn't have occurred to Jack to blow open the hatch. And then that whole dangerous dynamite plan, which almost resulted in candidate deaths, wouldn't have been embarked upon. Again, the dynamite. What happens with the monster attacking them in the dynamite plan? I think that is the Man in Black trying to get anyone but Locke to blow themselves up. I think it is particularly Hurley. Like Hurley, I think is the number one target there. But Kate, I think, would also have been a good one. I think Jack, he's milking that conflict between Jack and Locke, but he wouldn't have been mad if Jack died. But Locke's really the only person that the Man in Black didn't want to blow up in that situation. I think that's why why the monster drags Locke away. He's trying to get them to chase with the dynamite, which is dangerous and likely to explode. But also he's trying to keep Locke away from the dynamite. Anyways, sorry, I went on a tangent there. My point is that things play out the way they do after Boone's death, specifically because Boone was brought back alive and he let slip certain things, and the oversimplified story that Locke told was quickly revealed to be false. And that gets pretty much the whole camp to be suspicious of Locke. And again, it brings more people into the hatch plan, which it makes it more likely to get opened. And by the way, the monster probably wants to get them to open that hatch because, again, we'll talk about this in season 2. But if he can get that pocket of energy to be compromised by interfering with the button being pressed, then the chain of events that would follow that would be that the source would somehow be compromised, and maybe that would result in him being free, or at the very least, it would result in most, if not all, of the candidate deaths. The catastrophe that would take place on the island by the button not being pressed, and if the failsafe wasn't turned, would result in many candidate deaths, more than likely. The monster also has a motivation for wanting them to get into the hatch. And I think Locke is correct when he says that what happened to Boone out at that plane was part of a chain of events that has led us to here, to this moment. It leads to the hatch, to us opening the hatch. I think he's absolutely right about that, but he's wrong about the island being the one leading them down there. He says that Boone was a sacrifice the island demanded. Once again, I think he's correct. It's just not the island, it's the Man in Black. Again, I won't say that anybody's wrong for choosing to believe that the island was trying to interfere with the Man in Black's plan. The Man in Black, in this interpretation, the Man in Black caused the dream, and he's leading them out there because he wants Boone to die. But the island is trying to interfere and stop them by taking away Locke's ability to walk. I won't tell anybody they're wrong if they want to take that interpretation, but I absolutely think it also makes sense as far as the question of why the Man in Black would return Locke's ability to walk while Boone is still alive. I absolutely think that makes sense. There's that. I can't believe I've spent the vast majority of this episode talking about that. I mean, I'm not mad about it. Like I said, I'm always glad just to not have dead air, but there were other comments specific to this episode that I wanted to get to. I guess it's just the one, but I know there was something else I wanted to say. Checking my notes. Yeah. I mean, it kind of sucks because there was other things I wanted to talk about, but I'm sure I feel like it's stuff I more or less already talked about in the other two podcast episodes. Or like I kind of wanted to talk about Russo's story and them hearing the numbers and Sam Toomey and Leonard hearing the numbers. I did actually kind of bring this up in the non spoilery episodes too. The weirdness of the fact that they were never heard by the outside world until that night, and then they were never heard again. And Russo's transmission was never heard again. And we eventually learn what I couldn't talk about in the non-spoilery episodes is that we do know that the numbers were playing for years before that. And we eventually find out that Dharma was controlling which transmissions were making it off the island. Using the looking glass, they're able to block transmissions, and so the looking glass needs to basically make it possible for a transmission to get through. And even in that Alvar Hanso orientation video, he talks about the numbers being broadcast. He says on a frequency and encryption known only to us, I think is how he says it. So all of these things combine to tell us that for a listening post and a French research vessel to hear that transmission at the same time, this was a very unique situation, and it would seem to suggest that somebody within Dharma manually made it so that the transmission could be heard by the outside world. And I think I did allude, I think back in the solitary commentary, I alluded to my belief that that's very significant and that it points to a very interesting story. And yeah, it's something that I feel like a lot of people don't ever notice. Like I've never really seen anybody else bring up that fact. And yeah, for me, I had my own ideas on what was going on there, and I think before I alluded to Montan's insistence that they find the transmission as being relevant to my interpretation of what was going on. And it also, kind of informs my thoughts on why the monster attacked the French team and why it infected them. Because that's not something that we typically see from the monster. The other infection cases that we've witnessed, he's just taking advantage of the fact that they are near death, and he's using that opportunity to infect them. In the case of the French team, it's the one time where we see the monster actively attack a group, and then we see Montan get injured, and I would argue killed. I don't know that anybody debates that. We see his body in those tunnels later. So I think it's pretty widely accepted that Montan was killed pretty much immediately after being dragged into the tunnels, and then what we hear calling for help is actually the monster. I'm going on another tangent again. My point is, we don't see what happened to Brendan, Lacombe, and Robert, what caused them to end up mortally wounded and then infected, because we do know that that's a prerequisite of infection, is the person has to be near death. No might be a strong word, but I mean, that is, again, I've done a whole video essay on the infection. All of the evidence points to that being the case. Anyways, so yeah, the monster acts pretty uniquely there. He seemed to decide. There's much more premeditation going on with him infecting the French team versus the other cases of infection we've seen. So yeah. Anyways, did I finish my thought on the transmission there? Yeah. Again, just interesting. Like I said, I think there's so much story not told about the French expedition and what happened to Russo and her team that we never see on screen. There's so much worth exploring there, and so much that I feel like is hinted at. That I wish that we had seen it. But yeah. Anyways, so yeah, that's the one thing I'm talking about. Okay, but getting to the last comment. So in our main podcast episode on this numbers episode, Um, I started to read Ben Ward's comment from uh, it was the spoilery commentary on Solitary. He commented about Rousseau, um, specifically putting the trap that Sayid gets caught in, putting that near the cable in an attempt to catch one of the others. I'm going to read that comment again and then kind of recap my thoughts before and why this episode kind of swayed me a bit more. I was pretty neutral when I responded to this originally in my Raised by Another commentary, but yeah, this episode kind of swayed me towards what Ben was saying a bit. Okay, so Ben's comment. I guess it makes sense that Russo originally set the trap up in that location with the hopes of catching another. Considering how she reacts when she catches someone who she assumes is another here, she captures and interrogates him about Alex rather than just staying out of the way and allowing him to regain consciousness and escape back into the jungle. But but she has apparently never had any luck because they're far too competent. And then it's the events of this episode onwards that change her reaction when she next catches one. Um, Referring to Henry Gale. So backing up there to the original point was that this idea that Russo was trying to catch another in the net, and my reasons for being unsure about that was that Ben, we eventually see that Ben, when he took Alex, told Russo that if she ever comes after him or if she ever comes after him, what he says is, if you ever come looking for her, I'm trying to remember, I guess he says two different things, because he says the thing about, like, if you ever hear whispers in the jungle, like, run the other way. And he's saying that, like, if you want your baby to be fine, it's killing me that I can't quite remember the exact wordage of this. But if she wants Alex to be all right, don't come looking. So that's why I was like, yeah, I don't know. I think maybe this was just one of the random traps she set, because we know she sets them in different locations of the island, and yeah, Sayid happened to get caught in it. And my thinking was that, like, once she realizes this has happened, she doesn't know how long Sayid has been in this trap. She may think the damage is already done, that the others are already wondering where this guy is, and they may already be blaming her for doing something with him, and therefore Alex might already be at risk. So she might as well cut him down, try and torture information out of him so that she can try and save Alex from any punitive retaliation. That was kind of the interpretation I was leaning towards. Then this episode reminded me that, oh wait, there's another trap set along this cable, which really adds additional merit to what Ben was saying, that, like, okay, if she set at least two traps up directly alongside this cable, it does almost seem like she was trying to capture someone that may have been trying to maintain the cable. So what I kind of talked about in the Raised by Another commentary was the idea that enough time has passed that she thinks that she can, or that it's worth trying this, without it substantially putting Alex at risk, that Alex has grown up to some degree, become part of this community, or maybe they've even just kind of forgot about Rousseau, and therefore if one of them were to go missing, they wouldn't even put it together that it was her right away. And so, yeah, maybe just enough time has passed and enough desperation to see her child again has built up, and maybe she's lost faith in the likelihood that her daughter's being treated well or is still alive, that she decides to go ahead and put this plan into action. So So yeah, like I said, that's what's. I kind of talked about both of those possibilities and said that I was leaning towards the first one. Um, this episode and that second booby trap has me pivoting a little bit. Although now, as I'm saying this, it's occurring to me that second trap that Hurley triggers would not benefit her if the goal is to find out information about where Alex is, because that trap was designed to kill whoever triggered it, or or whatever animal triggered it. Um, so that's funny. That's interesting. Um, it's funny how both times that I've talked about this on one of these commentaries, you guys are literally hearing me think about it in real time and go back and forth on it. Um, huh. Well, so I mean, ultimately, that's the theme of this episode is things are open to interpretation. Whichever one makes more sense to you, by all means. This is officially one of those things where I don't have a strong opinion either way. Um, Both make sense to me for different reasons. Yeah, although now, yeah, man, I wish I had thought of that before, because yeah, now I'm trying to think it through while you guys are listening to me, and I'm like, yeah, from the perspective of her specifically targeting others, what would be the benefit of that second trap immediately killing one of them? Um, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I suppose it could draw somebody in looking for them, and then yeah, that could pass off as an accident if they were somehow to communicate back to the others. I don't know. And then she could capture that one. I have no idea. But okay, the episode has long since ended, so I will do my credits now. Thank you to candidate number 90, Ben Ward, candidate 108, Jeffrey Winslow, candidate 69, Brian Phillips, candidate 32, Chuck Boyd, and candidate 341, Hans. I'd also like to thank the multiple people that have donated equipment and resources used in the production of this podcast. These include Brandon Huth, Charles Huth, Mary Mullins, William McMinn, and Charlene McMinn. And yes, so now I will be working on. I've already been working on it a little bit, but the main podcast episode for Deus Ex Machina. That's another part of the delay. Is there were a lot of issues with us filming that day, and us, yeah, there's just a lot of editing that needs to happen with that episode. So that's been another overwhelming factor. But after that, we've recorded everything except for our very last season finale episode. And all of those have been really good. They've all felt really good in the recording. So yeah, those should be easier to edit, and I'm excited for you guys to see or hear those. But yeah, oh, and that reminds me, we will be recording our season finale episode this upcoming Wednesday. I'm gonna do a community post, basically asking if anybody has any thoughts on that they'd like to share on the podcast. And you guys can comment on that, or you can leave comments about the finale on this, since it is a full series spoilers video, or you can email in to dr.candlepun@gmail.com, and those can be either just written, or you can also send an audio or video message. And yeah, that'll be for our big finale episode. And yeah, in that finale episode, we're talking about Exodus parts 2 and 3. So if you have anything to say about either of those, both of those, the season as a whole, or even just kind of what you're looking forward to in the future as far as the podcast, any feedback or recommendations you might have, things like that. But all right, I think I'm going to shut up now. I hope you guys come back for any and all of the future episodes, and until then, as always, namaste and good luck.